I have the Resonator out of the KTM 390 Adventure in this hand, and I have a straight through pipe in this hand. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you do that thing down below. That really helps out my channel. I have the Resonator out of the KTM 390 Adventure in this hand, and I have a straight through pipe in this hand. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what the Resonator does, if you're not familiar with it, why I'm replacing it with this straight through pipe, and then I'll go through the process of pulling this out and putting this in. It's fairly straightforward, depending on whether or not you have a aftermarket skid plate like I do. The Black Dog Cycle works. There's a few extra steps that I had to go through, but it's pretty basic, pretty simple, and I think it's worth doing. So let's go through that. If you look between the swing arm in your bike, you will see this big chunk chamber that is called the Resonator. Now, I have seen this mislabeled as the catalytic converter. It is not a catalytic converter. On this particular bike, there are two, and they are located in the header pipe. There's one, the bulge in the header pipe, where it comes out of the engine and comes down and around, is the first one, and then there's another one right at the end of the header pipe before it goes into the Resonator. Now, the purpose of the Resonator, just generically speaking, not necessarily on this bike, is it performs a couple of different functions. One of them is noise reduction. In there, these chambers are engineered to create certain wave patterns inside to help reduce the overall noise of the engine. And in high performance vehicles, sports cars, those types of things, resonators are used to create a certain tone of exhaust from the engine. This can also provide some additional back pressure on the engine to give it a certain performance characteristic. The reason why I think this bike has this is for noise reduction, is to get the sound under certain requirements. I don't know if it's a Euro 5 requirement that noise out of bikes have to be at a certain level, but that's what I think it's for. I've looked inside of this. There is some baffling inside for noise reduction. So it'll be interesting to see when I put the straight through pipe what the exhaust note is like afterwards. Now, I'm not too concerned about the back pressure that this could be providing to the engine. I think a lot of the back pressure is going to come from the catalytic converters because the way that those fill up the header pipe and coming out. So we'll see if that is a problem as well, and then we'll also test after we get the new one on whether or not there's any errors that come up on the engine. It's my understanding from the research that I've done and looking at this that just replacing this does not require a remapping of the bike, but if I had changed out the whole exhaust pipe with like the Cooper one, that does require remapping. Alright, there's really one primary reason why I am doing this, but there's also two factors that are going along with that, or two benefits from doing it. Maybe not huge benefits, but they still exist. The number one reason why I'm replacing this with the straight through pipe is because the Resonator is located so close to the rear shock, and this has so much heat generated in it. All that heat is going into the rear shock, and I've already had one rear shock fail on me. I would like to put an aftermarket shock on this bike, but I don't want all the heat from the Resonator going up into the shock and just putting a lot of extra stress on the shock as it is. The kinetic energy that the shock is trying to control already generates heat in it, and then you add this, that's a lot of stress on the seals. So that is really the primary purpose I'm doing this. Secondary effect is this is 7.2 pounds. The straight through pipe that I'm putting on is, I think I weighed it, it's 1.4 pounds. So that's 5.6, 5.8 pound reduction in overall weight of sprung weight on the suspension. It's not a huge reduction, but I think it's worth getting that done. And then the other thing is it may change the way the bike sounds and give it a little bit more character, a little bit more life. That's why I'm replacing the Resonator. So let's get moving to get this pulled out and get the straight through pipe put in. One quick note about these straight through pipes. If you look at the labels on these, depending on where you get them, it will say for off-road use only, so keep that in mind. This is not approved for use on roads. If you do this install, you are doing this at your own risk of being out of compliance with motor vehicle rules. Now, that's up to you if you want to do it. This particular straight through pipe I purchased from Shift Tech off of eBay. It was, I think, with shipping and handling, $135. I did a little bit of research on Shift Tech. It looked like they also made a lot of parts for Ducati. I felt comfortable with the designs. The welds on this look very, very good. So to me, this was something I could trust. There's a number of Chinese models out there that you can pick up for about $50, $60. And there's also one out of Australia that's about $250. So it's up to you, whichever one you choose to do if you're going to do this. I decided to go with Shift Tech. First thing we need to do is take off the stock, well, the exhaust. If you have an aftermarket exhaust, you got to take that off. I'm going to start with this. It's a 12mm socket for the clamp, and then a 12mm where it bolts on for the mounting point that holds it in place. So I'll get that done real quick. I chose not to take the luggage off just because I was hoping it wouldn't be too much in the way. We'll see how that goes. I may regret that. Okay, pull that out. Next thing I need to do is loosen the bracket, the clamp on the resonator where it goes to the header pipe. It's tucked up underneath the bike. I'll do the best I can to show it, but it might be a little challenging. Alright, the next thing we need to do is we're going to have to pull the header pipe off. Just take it off of the engine a little, loosen it so that it separates from the resonator in the back there. And if you use a universal drive on your 3/8 inch, you should be able to get in there and be able to loosen those up. When I put the skid plate on, I basically just pulled the entire header off. I didn't take it off of the bike because the O2 sensor is in there. You don't need to do that. You can leave it on. You just have to move it away. When you put it back on, just make sure that the header pipe is moved away from the oil filter plug that comes out enough that you can get that out. When I first put it back on, I had it tilted just a little to the right, and it made it a little challenging to get it out, so I had to make an adjustment. So before you tighten everything up, make sure you have clearance all the way around. So the next step will be to pull the header off. These bolts at the top of the resonator that I'm showing in the center of the frame, that's an 8mm. There's one on each side that holds the top of the resonator in. I'm going to pull those out right now. At the bottom of the resonator, there's this bolt here that's a little bit difficult to see, and it is a 13mm head. Now that was a replacement bolt when I put the skid plate in, and that suspends the resonator there. So I need to pull that out, and then the resonator should drop right out. Alright, I got the resonator out. It took some wiggling. I also had to take the bracket, the main mounting bracket for my skid plate off, and then there was room for this to come out. Now a couple of things is there is a gasket in here that I'm going to try to save. If I don't save it, then I'm going to be kind of in trouble because I don't have another replacement gasket. I should have bought one before I did this. And then also there's some rubber grommets on here that I'll show that you have to take out to put on the new piece. Just real carefully. And there's the gasket. So I'm going to reuse this. And if I get a lot of noise or I feel like there's an exhaust leak, I will get a new one and put it in. The next thing we need to do is we need to take the grommets off of this. So that wasn't too bad. I just folded this in on itself, pushed it through. I don't want to use any screwdrivers or any tools because I don't want to damage the grommet. I just want to get it pulled through. There, got it. That's going to have to go in. I just put the bracket for my skid plate back up on here, so I'm hoping that I can get all this to fit together. This is a very small piece to work with, unlike the resonator, which went way up into the frame. The other thing to note is off of the resonator you have this bushing here and this rubber mount. So you're going to keep the rubber mount and put it in there, which I had already shown, but then this piece is going to go sticking to the inside, and then you'll run a bolt through which the old resonator attached to. So this should be pretty easy to put in. That's what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to, it's so hard to film from underneath. I'll just slide it in there and show you what it looks like after it's all together. This is loosely fit together. And what I need to do is start with the header pipe and make sure that's put in the right place. And tighten it from there and then work my way towards the exhaust. Alright, exhaust is all done. The skid plate's put back on. The only thing that's left to do now is to take it for a test ride. And yeah, we'll go out and see what it sounds like on the road. Running the exhaust through, warming everything up, getting it to fit back together. Make sure that there's no ECU errors and that everything seems okay. So yeah, let's go do that. Need to make one quick note before wrapping up this video. I spoke with a representative from EPN Performance, who is the US distributor for HyperPro, because I'm looking at putting a HyperPro aftermarket shock on. I have ordered it. We had a discussion about the failures of this shock and whether or not the location of the resonator is having any effect on those. His opinion was it probably isn't. It's just that the shock on these bikes is very simple and it's not made for heavy duty use, and that the way I ride this bike is probably what's destroying the shock. However, I still think there's a lot of heat load being put on the shock with the wear that it's going through and the chance for it to get dirt and debris. It's exposed. All shocks are, and just that heat will soften things up just enough maybe to get some debris up in there. Just my opinion on it. Other people are going to have different opinions, but I think taking that heat source off of the shock by removing the resonator, in my opinion, will make me feel better about spending over $1,000 on a replacement shock. So at least that will not be a factor or something that's affecting the performance of the shock. Now, the other thing that heat does, being that close, is it thins out your oil in the shock, so it's not performing as well either. So that is another factor with removing the resonator for just the suspension side of this bike. Final assessment after removing the resonator with a through mid pipe. The bike definitely sounds louder to me. I'm not sure if the video showed that or not. I think it probably will. I want to say that the throttle response is better. I want to say that it has a little bit more pep to it, but honestly, it's probably more psychological than it is anything else. I don't think I can really say objectively without having two bikes sitting here where I can jump from one to the other. So the biggest issue was trying to keep the heat off of the shock. If this is something you want to do the work at your own risk and realize that it's meant for off-road use only. Now, this bike is certainly not louder than a lot of the other bikes that I hear out there, the Harleys that I hear ripping by on the highway there. It is not that loud. It's marginally louder than it was before. I hope you found this useful. Get out, do some riding, maybe make some fun modifications to your bike that encourages you to get out and do more riding. And if there's any other modifications that you recommend, if you've done this with your bike as well, leave those in the comments below. I'm curious to see what other people's experience is, and I will see you out there. I did it. I just reached a significant achievement for the year. I reached the 20,000 mile mark on motorcycles, which I just blows my mind how much riding I did this year. I just didn't think that was going to happen. And it's the 1st of December and somehow I reached that milestone. And also with all those miles came 31 nights in a tent. So I effectively slept in a tent for 1 month of this year. And that's with working a full-time job and having plenty of responsibilities. So I can't wait to see what I can do in retirement.